everybody to our data science seminar today, part of our data science seminar series. And today I'm very happy to announce Jim Cain, who's CEO of Napkin Analytics. So as you can guess, they do data analytics. And so he's going to give us an overview of what they do. Without further ado,
well, thanks. Hi, everybody. It was kind of cool to hear it sold out. I've never sold out before. That was kind of badass. My name's Jim, and I actually brought my friend Colin with me. Colin's the director of analytics solutions at Napkin. And what we wanted to do today, when Alex is with us from Napkin as well, and when we heard about the series, what we wanted to really kind of accomplish with our session was talk a little bit about the intersection between what we specialize in and data science. So I'll tell you a little bit about Napkin and how we started to become much more of a technology practice. I want to talk a little bit about the history of our industry and the discipline. A lot of the things that are coming out, again, especially in marketing and in sales and increasingly in things like fulfillment and logistics, you're really starting to see the digital analytics team in the organization being given a wider mandate. So we really feel that the reason for that is because digital analytics, dealing with real-time data, dealing with large data sets, being agile with your questions and your answers, has created a discipline that isn't just about AdWords and online sales anymore, right? So what's the history of the discipline? How does that maybe pertain into some best practices for data science at large? That's piece one that I want to cover. The second thing that I want to talk about beyond the history of the discipline is, what does a reference grade digital analytics infrastructure look like? So more the plumbing. I won't nerd out too hard, but we'll really be talking about what that reference infrastructure looks like, because it will, I think, help you as data scientists appreciate what this particular pipe of data would look like into some of the work that you're doing. When I've done that, I'm actually going to pass this gigantic microphone to Colin, and he's going to talk in a little bit more use case specific about, as a data scientist with access to well-governed, well-structured, highly available, and accurate data, what are the kinds of cool things that you can do with that data to ask good questions, give good answers, and kind of inform the enterprise? So that's what we're going to do today. I hope you're excited about it, because that was a pretty big pitch. So who is Napkin? We turned 8 years old in March of this year. We're called Napkin because they didn't have paper at the bar when I had the idea for the company. And our original logo was a shamrock because I spilled Guinness on the napkin. So I'm not a marketer, but we're very good at measuring it. We're really looked on as the organization that helps ask good questions and gives non-fiction, highly accurate, usable answers, right? So I really think of what Napkin does as data journalism, which is ironic because I'm a Carleton grad, but they wouldn't let me into the journalism program. So I started a company that did something similar. So when you think about our approach to data journalism, there's really two pieces, right? There's the typewriter, and there's the journalist, right? And the problem with a lot of digital analytics, and probably data science as well, is that you spend way more time fixing the busted apparatus that you want to tell your story with than you do being able to ask a question, get an answer, inform the business. So we've really moved from the early days of Napkin, which was me in a Vonage box, to Napkin now, 26 people. We really moved from being a business that exclusively took the existing data in the digital marketing department and built dashboards, did ad hoc analysis, did optimization or conversion rate optimization analysis. And we've moved over the last 8 years into an organization that has to be full solution. So we build the infrastructure, we do all of the implementation to make data available and accurate and governed and structured. And increasingly we're moving into a place, as I mentioned at the beginning, where our work is getting enough recognition that our enterprise clients are going, could you expand your scope into all of marketing? Could you expand your scope into asking sophisticated questions about logistics and fulfillment? And that's really where this data science piece comes from for us. So that's me without a beard. My wife likes this picture. And this is Colin. These are our Twitter handles. If there's anything you don't get the time to ask us today, fire them out on Twitter. Alex will make sure we answer them. And so I'm going to start with a couple stories. So these are stories that came directly from clients of ours over the last 7 years. where we actually weren't able to do the best possible job because of the hard wall at the end of available data for digital analytics. It's part of why we're so excited about changes in our space that allows us to move into data science. Right, this one's the how many pairs should there be in the warehouse question. So this is $1 billion online and catalog retailer in the United States. They sell a lot of fruit. They actually invented the mail order fruit basket. And we helped re-implement all of their analytics infrastructure, built the dashboards for the CEO, but it was very digital, very that silo, right? And we ended up on a call one day with someone in their merchandising department, and he said, I wonder if you guys can help us answer this question that's been killing us for years. Because the problem is, they either buy too much fruit or not enough fruit to put in the warehouse, right? So if you think of the seasonality in this business, they have one season for about 4 weeks, and a $1 billion company, in about 4 weeks, they do 70% of their annual revenue. So if you look at their kind of yearly revenue trend, it just looks like a sideways map of Nepal. It just goes bang, right? And that's the whole year for them. So really thinking about product availability when that product is perishable was a significant challenge in this business. So they said, what data do you have available to help inform this model we're building to predict how many pairs we should have in the warehouse next year? Because if it rots, you can't sell it. So one of the things that we were able to help them generate in terms of data, so I don't know if you guys have ever bought a perishable product on the web before, or a product that has change or fluctuation in inventory, but sometimes beside that buy now or add to cart button, there will be a buy now and we'll get it to you by this date. So that on their website was actually powered by their back office, or I think they had a big IBM supply chain management system that would go, based on the number of pairs we have available, we cannot ship this thing to this person until this date. The less of the inventory they had available, the farther out that date would be, right? With the digital analytics infrastructure we put in place that was tracking everything on the site, we were able to see when someone looked at a particular product page, A, could they get shipped immediately, or did it need to be shipped at a later date? What was the date presented? And what was the associated conversion rate of the person that was presented that date? Did it go down? Did it stay the same? Et cetera, et cetera. So we were actually able to instrument that entire feed and give it to the inventory team so they could go, if we push out the ship date by this long, we start to impact sales. But up to this point, it's okay, and then they can start bringing that into their inventory fix and actually tie conversion or conversion association to inventory. We couldn't do it, which was kind of a bummer. All we could do was create the piece of the answer that they needed, so they could actually go to their internal, they would call it data mart, but their data science practice to answer that question. So the solution wasn't actually digital analytics, but we helped create the solution because of that real-time, conversion-oriented, user-level data. So that's story one. Story number two, this was 4 or 5 years ago. Who should I stop sending my catalogs to? So again, a very large company who is now bankrupt, not our fault. And they were a major cataloger. They had 300 or 400 stores, mostly in the Southeast, and they're in fast fashion, which is not a great business to work in right now. But they had a giant catalog business. So catalogers, especially in the enterprise, use totally different language. They're not used to real-time data, but they're really smart when it comes to being able to leverage data to ask a question and get an answer. So these guys are actually really cool to work with. They were just blown away that we could answer a question in an hour and not like 3 months, right? But they said, we roughly understand of all the people we send our catalogs to, that it's influential, but it's we think, right? Like a lot of offline marketing is faith-based. Like I did a thing, I saw something happen later. It's pretty hard to correlate those things, right? What can our digital analytics team tell us about how catalogs work so we can either grow or remove people from the list, et cetera, et cetera. So again, at this point, which is about 4 or 5 years ago, we were only able to do inference level analysis, right? So something happened here and something else happened there, but hum a few bars and fake it, right? So we were able to do a few things in terms of understanding against their catalog drops. So they send 1 million catalogs, and we know that within 2 weeks, they start seeing the site traffic go up from the catalogs because that's when the mailboxes are getting the catalogs. We were able to do searches on the site around when someone does a site search for a product number rather than a thing. Very clearly is someone with a catalog, because you don't go searching for OU812 on the, you look for blue socks, right? So people who are searching for that thing as a percentage of traffic tied to catalog drops, is the catalog growing, is it impactful or is it not? And we were also able to look based on the geography in which they drop the catalogs for lift in traffic from certain kinds of marketing campaigns. So branded search, they search for the name of the company, like by name in Google. Same thing with organic search, and the same thing with what's called direct traffic, or someone that just went directly to the site without an interstitial marketing touch. We could see the lifts of all of those things, and we actually were able to help this company realize that their catalog was just slowly dying. The kinds of things we can do now and the kinds of things that Colin will talk about could give you the ability to go, it's dying with this percentage of our traffic, and here are the people that we don't send the catalog to anymore. That wasn't possible even 4 years ago. It is now, and those are the kinds of things that we're starting to move into. So, because of these stories and my intro about I want to talk about the history, I want to talk about the infrastructure, I'm going to do that. So, the first 3 points are going to be mostly me. What is the history of this industry that we're in, that we're kind of at the vanguard of, at least in my opinion? What is the underlying reference grade infrastructure that allows you to both win in digital analytics, but also create that structured silo of data that can be brought into a more holistic kind of enterprise analysis practice? And then touching a little bit on some of the details of marketing campaign analytics. Do you guys do anything with marketing when you're talking about data science or any of the practice work you do, or it's all net new stuff? Hey, the one guy, great. It's you and me. So marketing campaign analytics in digital analytics, regardless of whether you have a large, like your Intel, your consumer packaged goods, you don't sell anything. What I did and what it cost to get someone to interact with our presence is pretty critical stuff, right? So in digital analytics, it is a kind of a core leg of the table on understanding that piece of the enterprise. So I'm going to touch on that for a minute. And hopefully at that point, I won't have rambled so much that Colin has time and that he's able to kind of take the structure of this is where it is and this is how it should work, and really start to apply it into some specific use cases. We're going to try and do it quickly enough that you guys can answer some or ask some questions at the end. So, digital analytics is a really interesting story of a series of very clearly defined evolutions. Now, I've been in the industry since 2007. And before that, I was selling stuff but leveraging some of those best practices. So I've kind of been involved in the industry for a long time. And it really has been a series of very clearly demarcated evolutions in terms of what does this thing mean to the business. So kind of if you go left to right, we're looking at the time basically from late 90s to now. And then if you go up, you're kind of looking at the value. And by value, I mean to the enterprise. So the first thing is that if you go back to that late 90s period where everybody wanted to own their domain name and they had to put something on it, but it was mostly brochureware. Every company said, we need a website. So they all had one. They didn't really do a whole lot. It was our brochure, and it was contact us, and it was, basic stuff. But it still cost money, right? And at that time, it was pre-cloud, so most organizations would have like a box in the server room with their website on it. And no one really cared about the website unless it broke, and then someone would get yelled at. Like, why is the website down, right? So the IT department built basic reporting to understand the server logs of what was happening on the website. So an example of a log file for the website would be this particular image was called and it was impressed in this period of time in a visit that took this long. Fair enough? Ish? Yeah. So IT built this thing basically to play defense against the marketing department so they wouldn't get yelled at if the website went down. Now, it's at some point in the later 90s, someone in marketing went, hey, wait a sec. I can use those reports to understand which of the pages we put up on the website people actually read. So would it be cool if you guys were to give me a dump of all that server log data and I was to put it into something a little bit prettier? IT said yes, and that's web analytics. Like, that's really where it comes from, right? So the marketing organization realizing they can start to repurpose technical assets to do better jobs as marketers. And the data from those server logs was timely, it was relatively accurate, it was so much better than the absolute nothing they had the day before, that they were able to start really thinking about how are people interacting with our brand in a fine-grained level of detail, and how can we use that to create a better experience? And that was kind of the dawn of digital analytics, right? So depending on the organization, and this is why you have people in the industry like me who come primarily from the business side, and people like Colin who come primarily from the technical side with the same job description, is because at that particular period of time, there were marketers who were okay at math, and there were engineers who were really good at business requirements, and they basically got told, here, you take this, you take web analytics. And the industry really started to take off at that point when people started to take it seriously. So the first web analytics tool company is called WebTrends. It's still around, but it's kind of Betamax. But it was actually a very pretty log file analysis tool. So it was taking all the data from the server room, interpreting it into business user-facing reports, rinse, repeat. And that went around for a little while, right? So the initial vendors entered the marketplace. People realized that this wasn't the byproduct of an IT process, but it was actually a very valuable exercise on its own. And actually, it began the never-ending battle in our industry, which is that marketing and IT despise each other. And it is very, very difficult to create alignment on what winning looks like when you have people that want to build things and people who want to know if the things made money. Because digital analytics, similar to what you guys are doing, is a very weird overlap of technology and business practice, right? So the next big thing in the industry is that we move from log files to something that's a little bit more sophisticated, or client-level analysis, right? So the data requirements that the marketing department had very quickly started to supersede what was available in those log files, right? Like, I don't want to just know how many pages were viewed. I want to know who viewed the pages. I want to know if they had a high-speed internet connection. I would love to know where they lived. Things like that, right? Not the creepy stuff we do now, entry-level creepy stuff. So players started to enter the marketplace with a new type of digital analytics product, which was not deployed at the server level. It was deployed at the client or the browser level. So this is where you start seeing, you guys familiar with how cookies work a little bit? So these are cookie-driven products that actually load as part of the browser session and send the data home. So a completely different type of product than a log file analysis product. They each have pros and cons, but it really opened up the door to much more sophisticated visitor level data. So we can get language, we can get IP address, we can get how long a page took to load, right? And those are the kinds of things that the business side of the organization was just desperate for to make the site more effective and more functional. And this also coincides a lot with people starting to make heavy, heavy investments in the web. So again, kind of early 2000s, right? Because now they could finally go, I spent a nickel, we made $1, here's what happened by leveraging some of these new school tools. This is about when I entered the marketplace at the beginning of my career. And the single biggest thing, like little anecdote, but the single biggest thing most of these marketers cared about was geographic location. Because it's kind of cool to know that someone was, right? And it didn't work at all in the early 2000s. And it didn't work not for any kind of technology reason. It was because for most major brands, 80% of their traffic looked like it was coming from Reston, Virginia. Does anybody know why?
AOL.
AOL, wow, that was awesome. Yeah.
Engineered them back in the day.
Yeah, so AOL, right? So normally when you surf the web, you're going into the web from your home network or the IP address in your house. If you use AOL, you're going into the web from the servers at AOL headquarters, which are in Reston, Virginia. So the technology worked fine, the marketplace didn't yet. So basically when AOL ran out of money sending everyone CDs in the mail, and they had to buy internet properly, it fixed that problem. But it just kind of goes to show you the progression in the space. So the tech entered the market, and the emphasis of the data really moved away from the asset, like this image, this page, and it turned around and became about the visitor. And by visitor, I literally mean a person who had an instance of engagement with our brand. I don't mean Colin Temple lives in Ottawa, red car, that kind of stuff. So, but it moved from kind of asset to visit, which was a very big deal. So that progression really got us to a point in the industry where we were starting to truly inform business decisions. Like, it wasn't kind of cool stuff that we would use to justify the new build of the website. It was really starting to become a performance management level asset, right? So the tech continues to evolve. It's becoming more accurate. We're getting higher levels of coverage. We're starting to think about integrations between different collectors of data to tell better stories. And the web as a concept starts to die as a concept too, right? Like the web analytic, by the way, there's an organization we're a part of called the Digital Analytics Association. It's full of people that like this stuff as much as we do. I would recommend you check it out. And it used to be called the Web Analytics Association. And it was kind of during this period, which was, I don't know, 2010s, where you see the move from web, like my website, to digital, which is our brand in the cloud, right? So the work that we were doing was my website, and then it became, we have 2 apps, we have connected devices, we have cloud technology that has a post-login, like my software lives in the cloud that I sell now, right? So really thinking about instrumenting all the pieces of that made things A, more sophisticated, and B, much more powerful in terms of what we could do. And then this was really where we started to see, and I mentioned this at the beginning, but the digital analytics organization really started to get a lot of juice inside the large organization or the large enterprise, because they were there first, right? So that we took something from the technology organization, it's real time, we figured out how to turn it into a continuous improvement oriented business asset. They were first. The HR department is doing that now. The fulfillment, the logistics people are trying to do that now. But a lot of those best practices for how do I think real time, how do I build structure, how do I be able to ask and answer questions in an agile way, that methodology already existed in the web marketing team. So you really started to see those things move out to the rest of the organization. The next level is really last 5 to 6 years, maybe even 3 to 4 years. This is where we started to make a lot of money at Napkin. So about 3 years ago, all of a sudden CMOs started to go, what is that? Can I have that? And it was literally like we had 1 year where we were selling to directors of e-commerce, and then the next year we were selling to CMOs. This is where we really started to, as a business, grow our enterprise practice. And I have some opinions as to why that is, but definitely the coverage of the data, the accuracy, and the fact that the guy that runs your paid search or your email team had better insights on the business than the CMO, they finally figured it out. And they were like, give me that, right? So digital analytics, again, in the last 3 or 4 years, went from being these guys that the marketing department won't go drinking with, but I guess they're out of the budget, and they sit near IT and no one really listens to them. That group of people now has a seat at the table, right? So how do we measure this has become relatively recently a first-class item in web design, in marketing campaign development, in app development, and again, that digital analytics team and the perceived value of the data it's creating has really increased its influence exponentially in the last couple of years. And we're starting to see the phrase of record a lot in our industry, which I think is interesting, right? So has anybody here ever worked in a company before where everybody has a different report? Like your boss goes, everybody, you need to give me a report, I'm a data-driven blah, blah, blah. And everybody makes their own Excel spreadsheet. They're all using pretty different data sets, and none of the reports match, and it was just like a totally wasted exercise. That's very classic enterprise, grow your own report mentality. And the movement towards tool of record is something that we're seeing a lot. So I think I mentioned it earlier, but we're one of Google's largest partners in the world for their 360 analytics product. And when we bring it into a big company, all the other crap they were doing, the app guy had a reporting tool he liked, and the SEO guy recommended we do this we burn it all down. We build an accurate, aligned, everybody has to use the same tool of record. And that's not the kind of thing you could get away with 5 years ago. because of that lack of perceived value, right? So that's been a big move in the last couple of years. And where Napkin is right now is on the cusp of digital to everything. So kind of as I've touched on before a couple times, we're being asked to take the methodologies that we use for digital analytics and apply them to bigger questions to other parts of the org. Colin and the president of Napkin and I had a long session yesterday about how to build our evolving data science practice. And it's because the song is different, but the dance steps are very similar in terms of taking an unstructured part of the business that has, crappy data, no tool of record, frustration around reporting. People spend half their week in Excel instead of half their week asking good questions, right? And so we're starting to be asked and tasked with moving out of digital analytics and into all kinds of neat stuff, which there's so much money in it, and it's very intimidating, and that's kind of where we are in our history right now, which is pretty exciting stuff. So, that's really the progression. So what I wanted to talk about with that, because, as I go through the story of Napkin, I just started a company to tell nonfiction stories. I wanted to take the available data that someone had, that no one was looking at, and inform a senior decision maker on, here's some products that your competitors have that you don't. Here are ad campaigns that don't make you any money. Here are things that support your strategic objectives. And over the course of that kind of industry evolution, we moved from being a company of analysis into a company that is extremely technical. So 4 years ago, we didn't have a single kind of technology, well, that's not fair. Colin and our president are both technical, but we didn't have a department that specialized in technology. It's now 50% of our revenue, and the single biggest driver of net new revenue in Napkin. And it's because, A, that increased perceived value of measurement, but also this industry is moving so fast that everybody keeps breaking the typewriter, right? So a few of the things that we'll talk about next are significant pieces of technology for a web analytics practice, and they are always screwed up when they are rolled out, right? So we almost entered into the technology side of the business as a defense mechanism, because every time there was a major kind of shift in the marketplace, all of our clients would break their data, and then we would get fired if we couldn't figure out how to fix it, right? So what I want to do to kind of set up Colin for some of his use cases is talk about what does a reference infrastructure look like for a digital analytics practice, and what are some of the key terms? Because what I'm hoping that you take from this part is, if you're in a situation as a data scientist where you're able to partner with the marketing team or work with the marketing team, this is the criteria by which, if you can check all the boxes, you have a world-class, high-value, real-time data feed to do very interesting work with. And before I get into this, does anybody have any questions? You're all awake. It's very warm in here. That's good. No? It means I'm killing it. All right. So what does a reference analytics infrastructure look like in 2018? This. Next slide. We're going to touch on all the pieces of this, but this is kind of a fun exercise in my office to go hear from a whiteboard. And you can kind of see some of the pieces of the evolution I talked about in here too. So when we started Napkin, we were just this. We were just in the web analytics tool. We would extract the data that existed in it. Ask me a good question, I'll give you a good answer. That was the whole business. As we started to evolve, a series of things happened that I will touch on. And they're normally about, again, the marketing team bought something, the IT department hates them, everything went bang, we had to clean it up. But the big things that started to come into the system, firstly, were major changes in the way that marketing data was being generated. So campaign data, additional metadata around campaigns, cost data. As this started to evolve, all of a sudden we needed to get very good at understanding how campaigns were built and tracked and monetized, and get that data into the system. The second thing that happened was the creation of tag management infrastructures, which are over here. And I'm going to spend a bunch of time on tag managers. Well, enough time on tag managers. This was a major change in the way that web analytics works and is made to work. And it's one of the things that enabled the next major groundswell, which is again kind of around now, which is acknowledging that the backing data store for web analytics is not the be-all and end-all, but a subset of the enterprise, and being able to get that data from the tools of record into something that is holistic and allows us to answer and ask big questions, and then move into kind of a full business data practice. So those are the things I'm going to touch on. So the first thing is, and this is where it gets wordy, so if anybody wants a copy of this after, that's why we did this, so just ask Alex. There's really two key types of data in digital analytics, and it's first-party data and third-party data. So I'll touch on those quickly. First-party data, the coverage, the control, and the quality are very different than what you would be looking at from third-party data. The coverage for first-party data is really anything that you want to capture within your run of network or within your digital ecosystem, right? So anything when someone shows up to your website, shows up to your app, logs into your product, if it's a cloud product, anything you want to know you can capture, providing you've properly instrumented the capture of that data. If you wanted to know how many times someone rolled their mouse over your logo, it would be dumb, don't do it, but you could. Anything is possible within that property that you own. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the level of control you have over what you're capturing, is it truly accurate? Does it meet the naming conventions that we use inside the business? Extremely high. It's your implementation in your site, it's your data. And again, the quality is very high, providing you take it seriously and you govern it and you normalize it and you keep it clean. So first-party data, the big thing about it is it's yours, you own it, put it under lock and key, and this is really what you would traditionally consider to be pure web analytics data. This is the stuff that the tool generates for itself. The other thing is third-party data. So I mentioned cookies earlier. So first-party data is tied to a first-party cookie. Third-party data is tied to a network or a third-party cookie. I'm sure you've all read articles about how creepy my industry is in terms of some of the things it can track and present. That's the advertising kids. So the digital analytics community is extremely aware of and quite strict about how we work with what's called personally identifiable, or PCI, which is personal credit information. We don't touch it, we don't want to see it, it adds no value, keep it somewhere else. Advertising people don't care so much about your privacy, right? So really the creepy things that you start to see in terms of, there's a Wall Street Journal article years ago about Capital One credit cards. And they had like 50 different products. And they knew exactly which one to present to you card-wise, because they were looking at your zip code, they were looking at the median income in your neighborhood, they were looking at all kinds of creepy stuff. We don't do that. And all that data would be what you would consider third-party network level data, right? But anyways, third-party data can be very valuable, but with great risk, right? So it's the entire commercial web. So I make a major advertisement in Facebook. All of the data that happens around my campaigns in Facebook is available to me as a customer. I can extract it, I can analyze it, I can marry it up with my other stuff. Google, AdWords, Google Base, or it's Google Shopping now. Amazon has a very robust kind of reporting suite. Those are all third-party, not my business, places where I can extract data, and the quality will be different, right? I have very little control over what they choose to present to me, and the coverage is actually interesting because you get coverage that you don't get on your own website in terms of certain kinds of things. Some of that shows up in your web analytics tool of record and is married with that first-party data to tell a more complete story. So first-party mine, third-party not mine. That's kind of the big thing. So you're probably wondering, where's the second party? You know, who's on second? Why'd you go from first to third? And the reason for that is that second-party data is actually kind of a relatively new thing. It's not particularly relevant to the web analytics infrastructure, but it may be to a data science practice around understanding and optimizing marketing. Data science, second-party data is renting someone else's first-party data, right? So everything that is available to me in my business that's been structured and normalized and made quality, you don't normally sell that for all kinds of legal reasons, but especially in publishing as an example, people will allow you to rent or subscribe to their first-party data. So for example, I sell high-end cars. I go to Apple and I go, people that buy my cars always have an iPhone. Can I start to see the performance data around your marketing and website campaigns so I can understand what works for you, because it might work for me? Would be an example of why you would get second-party data and bring it into a marketing analytics program. But we're not seeing it a whole lot yet. We do a lot more retail than we do publishing, so maybe that's why. So those are the three types of data that make up a web analytics discipline. What I want to talk about now is one of the more powerful pieces of a web analytics infrastructure, and it's called the Tag Manager. Is anybody here familiar with the Tag Manager? Hey, it's you again. Awesome. We're hiring. So tag management is a relatively new, again, when we kind of go through the history of the discipline before, it showed up right around the time that CMOs started caring about web analytics. Now, these types of tools have been around for a while, but the adoption was low. All a tag manager is anybody in here a web developer? Or, okay. So if you look at the code that makes up a web page, marketing technology normally gets deployed directly to the web page. So that's like the pixel for AdWords. That's the thing that lets my email tool know that someone from the email came to my site. Things like that. It's my analytics tool. So every piece of marketing technology has pixels and containers that allow data to flow back and forth between your website and their product, right? The way it used to work was that in order for that pixel to work on your site, you had to put it in your website. Now, if you look at the average large retailer we work with, some of their pages had 60 to 150 pixels on the page. Now, that creates significant problems for measurement because all those pixels fire separately. So let's say they're all looking at visits. How many people visited this page? If someone goes to the next page really fast, maybe half the pixels don't find out, right? So it leads to data quality issues. Behind the scenes, it also leads to a lot of performance issues like page load times and structure. And the worst thing, from the marketing department's viewpoint, is that the IT department won't do their homework fast enough. So marketers are getting new campaigns. Facebook comes out with a new way to listen to your laptop at home or something else creepy, and marketing wants to deploy it on the website. The IT department will often respond and go, we will set up that technology for you, but our production website is software. Like, we can't just fire it out there. So the next release is in 90 days. Marketing says that's not good enough. Sharks and jets. So one of the other things about a tag manager is that it divorces your entire marketing ecosystem or technology ecosystem from the production website. So you set up all your marketing tech in the tag manager, and you just deploy the tag manager to your website. So that means that your data quality is 100% accurate. It means that you've kind of divorced the requirements of marketing from the release schedules of IT. You can tell I sell a lot of these. But the big thing is that it creates high quality, easy to interact with data for the marketing department on the website. This was the thing that built our technology practice, because in literally, it was probably 2014, all of our big clients, the data just turned to trash in like 3 months. And we called all of them, we were like, we can't do the dashboard for the VP anymore, we can't answer your questions. Like, what did you do that broke everything? And in every single instance, they said, marketing made us deploy a tag manager. And so they moved all of their measurement from the direct website into this new piece of software, and they busted everything. So we built a tag management practice. And again, now it's one of the bigger things we do. And it turns out to be a critical piece of being a good analyst for a client for several reasons, right? So, I mean, I've touched on the tool itself, but the biggest thing about the tag manager is that in order to feed or inject all of the marketing pixels and scripts and containers to the site, it needs to have data available to serve to them, right? So if I was going to deploy an advertising pixel to the homepage of Napkin directly, I would ask Colin to do it, and he would code it into the page, and he would get that script to call a piece of data when it becomes available. And if he deployed another one, he'd do the same thing. Everything's completely bespoke, right? In order for a tag manager to work, it needs a single structured reference for all the available data that it could ever need to call on for all of its pixel ecosystem, right? So you build something called the data layer. And the data layer is really a dictionary that's built into more of at a page template level that gives naming conventions and structure and data availability for anything that could be asked for it in the marketing ecosystem. So A, that makes your tag manager work, but B, it creates an unbelievably high value business asset that can be used for several things. Tag manager is one, but the second is it's a real-time data feed of the entire clickstream of the business as defined by the marketing organization. So it's an extremely valuable asset. A quick example. How am I for time?
2:11.
That didn't help. Okay, so have you guys ever heard of have you guys ever heard of a company called Solar City? Okay, you again. So Solar City, it's like Elon Musk's brother-in-law or something. I think Tesla acquired it last year. I pitched them 3 years ago, and I tried to sell them Google Analytics, and they said, we're not interested. Because what they'd done is they got in a tag manager, and they built a giant data layer. Like everything that could happen on their site, including post-login, they're capturing all of it. Instead of feeding it to an analytics tool, they're feeding it to a giant data mart or a cloud storage data facility that the entire company uses for everything. So they actually bypassed the measurement tool. They took all of digital, pumped it into one spot. They took all of fulfillment, pumped it into the same spot with a lot of the rules I'm talking about in terms of structure and naming conventions and quality and governance, but they just bypassed the middleman, put it all in one spot, and they won't even hire a secretary there unless they can use Tableau. So I think that that's epic overkill for a lot of use cases, but it just goes to show you how powerful that structured data asset is. I gave a speech at a big event in Chicago in June, and this was the one thing people wanted to talk to me about after, because it is a serious challenge in a business, because you can build the data layer, but you have to ask the business users what data they care about, right? So that's why when we were chatting earlier, I was like, do you teach a course on business requirements? It seems like one of the hardest parts to winning with this kind of work, you know? So the impact on the business is huge, and no one's still doing it properly. So our next year's forecast has a lot of money fixing these things in it. The last thing I'm going to touch on super quickly is marketing campaign analytics. Again, it doesn't sound like you guys do a lot of campaign work, but when you're thinking about the effect of digital, there's a famous phrase, I know half of my marketing budget was wasted, I'm just not sure which half. You ever heard that one before? So you can answer it on the web, right? Just given the timeliness and the accuracy of the data. So if we're going to invest in developing an app, we're going to invest in developing a brand new e-commerce site, what happened when I spent a nickel? Did I get a quarter? Did I lose the nickel, right? You can get that at a very high level of detail, again, if you instrument it properly. So the only thing I would say about this one is that this is not a technology project per se. This is really a planning initiative, right? So if I'm going to send out an email, I need to ensure that the links in my email have the appropriate naming conventions so the analytics tool knew who it was and why, right? If you push your marketing analytics campaigns even further, which is what we do with our clients, you can actually inject the cost and performance data from the third-party network into the analytics tool. So you can start answering questions like, how did all of my marketing campaigns work together? So that's what's called multi-session attribution or marketing campaign attribution, which is the next big thing in our industry. So I spent $100 on this AdWord. Did I make any money? I spent $20 million last month on the web department. How much did I make and how did things work together? So that's where you start to see some of the machine learning that those products that are starting to come out actually starting to move into our marketplace. So we actually sell an advanced marketing campaign attribution product that starts to answer those kinds of questions if your data is available. So those are the big things. And this is a screenshot of what this would look like in Google Analytics. I don't need to nerd out on it, but I could spend an hour on the details. But again, this is available in real time. It is available in a high level of detail, and it is available to be exported and married to other things inside the business. to ask good questions and get good answers. So, you know, the things that I hope you took away so far before Colin starts to talk about some use cases is that digital analytics is awesome. I like it so much I bought the company. It's a constant evolution. It's considered to be kind of the vanguard on the business practice side of analytics for the enterprise. And we get to do lots of cool stuff. There's really only 3 types of questions that we get paid to answer. How did we get someone to show up? What did they do when they were here? Did they do what I wanted them to do when they were here? Everything else that we do is a subset of that. Even the advanced questions we get asked. Oops, I'll go back. Thanks, Colin. And then the third thing is each of these types of questions have their own associated infrastructure that roll up into that backing data store called the digital analytics data set. So it's a subset of what you guys do. But again, my peers in the data science community often say, most of my job is just bringing together all the trash that wasn't clean and well set up. Like most of my job is normalizing and cleaning up data so I can finally ask the question at the end. A well-run digital analytics practice means that you get to do the data science and not the cleanup of the yard before you start to do your homework, right? And so Colin will go through a few examples of what that means. Here you go.
Okay, so what I want to talk a little bit is about what data science can bring into the digital analytics industry as it exists today. So one of the key parts of my job at Napkin is kind of keeping us at the forefront of what's possible in the industry, bringing in more things, and more that means evolving our digital analytics practice. There are a lot of things that are coming down the pipe in terms of technology, in terms of understanding among people in the industry that are centered around, data engineering and data science. So I want to talk a little bit about where these skills come into play here. So back to this diagram of all the things. Digital analysts and people in digital analytics now are pretty good at this kind of area. Understanding the marketing data, getting things into tag managers, getting things into marketing tools and digital analytics tools, and then doing a little bit of reporting from there, either in those tools or pulling some data out in Excel and doing some reports there. Very good at that stuff. But it's this kind of side to the right here that data science skills really come into play. So there's the sort of data engineering piece that involves taking that data and bringing it together with other data in a data warehouse or a data mart or something. Some kind of storage. More and more this means online cloud storage, like putting things into Google BigQuery or Google Cloud Storage, putting things into Amazon S3 or Redshift in the cloud. But it often also means for large enterprises still keeping that data in servers in a server room somewhere that's under a tight lock and key. And then taking that data and moving it into some form that is accessible to analysts. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of data preparation, in terms of governing the kinds of data, the way it's presented. In here, I'm including everything from data pipelines that are performing ETL on data, or things like Hadoop, to machine learning. Taking all that data, preparing some kind of summary analysis or something that's useful out the other end. That's a big part of it, and then that all feeds into the kinds of reporting tools people are using. Simple ones that like Google Data Studio, which are very complex products, but are very useful for presenting very simple analysis and refreshable reports, to things like Tableau, where you can start to do really deep kind of dives into the data. and then developing custom data products for the kinds of questions that you can't easily answer there. Yeah. So the kinds of things that I want to work with data scientists on and data engineers on are integrating the data, bringing it in, making it clean and normalized and nice and easy to understand, and correct in some kind of predefined sense of what correct means. And that really has to do with doing those things, but creating an automated process that does those things, because as Jim alluded to a lot, many analysts spend most of their time even just cleaning up data, trying to get something that they can analyze, and chasing down people to say, this number that you gave me, what does this number actually mean? Like, what technically drives this number, and put it into your lab to give it to me. From there, there's advanced analysis, so being able to answer bigger questions, being able to just do the extension of what digital analysts are doing now, but bringing in new methodologies to do it better or do it on a larger scale. And then bringing in, that kind of machine learning technology that's coming down now to produce insights, to dynamically personalize interaction with a brand online, and to build some predictive modeling and some results there in terms of, okay, these products tend to sell well together, or if somebody does this on the website, they're probably going to buy one of these products. You should probably show it to them, or send them this marketing campaign, or remarket to them, or don't remarket to them because you're going to annoy them because they already bought the product that you're now showing to them on every website that they visit from now on.
Not that you're dwelling on it.
Not that I'm dwelling on it. But bringing in, that kind of intelligence and that kind of automated understanding of the large data set that you're working with. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples. The first one is kind of the data engineering example, which is really understanding that digital to everything context that is, Jim kind of pointed at as the new shift in digital analytics. So there's huge value right now in bringing in pieces of data from other areas of the business into the digital context. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that specifically, but this is something that data scientists can start to bring some practice maturity into digital analytics with. So there are a lot of enterprises that have data scientists doing really interesting things in other areas of the business that don't necessarily touch marketing or digital marketing very closely. And then they have a team of analysts in their digital marketing group that maybe aren't as sophisticated in terms of the kinds of things that they do, the kind of analysis that they do. They're used to working with a smaller data set, they're used to working with a messier data set, and they're flying by the seat of their pants. Is that fair to say?
Totally fair.
Yeah. So, and some of those areas are finance, sales, merchandising teams, operational data. Really bringing that in and associating that with the digital data gives you some context to that data, which is extremely important in the kinds of decisions that you make from that data. So I'm going to go through one example of that just by looking at a very simplistic example of 3 campaigns that were run, let's say in the summertime. You ran 3 campaigns and they produced, a certain amount of revenue. So when we were back in the days where, JavaScript was just getting started, like we were starting client-side analytics, you really could tell, okay, I made this much money. I generated this much traffic to the site was the first thing people looked at, and then they realized, well, that doesn't matter. How much money you made kind of matters more. So they would basically produce reports like this. And that's not, that's helpful to know, okay, I made more money here, but kind of simple. What most people do now is bring in marketing cost data. So it's usually marketing teams producing these kinds of reports and saying, okay, I ran this campaign, I spent this much on the campaign, and it made this much money. And one of the things you'll notice is that without the, if you were just looking at the revenue amount, you might say, okay, well, it looks like my display advertising campaign did really well. It made the most money. Very good. That doesn't mean that much because, email is really cheap. It made a lot more money overall in terms of actual return on advertising spend. That's all well and good, and that's what most people are doing now in marketing teams, and they're kind of stopping there, which is problematic because when you start to bring in more context, you can again change the kinds of decisions that you're making there. So in the case of, merchandising costs, you might have different campaigns are advertising different kinds of products, for example. So, maybe your display campaign was advertising, let's say you're an apparel company, you were advertising some sandals there. The other campaign was advertising some summer swimwear, different kind of product, different kind of cost of producing those products or acquiring those products. And so a very different result in terms of the actual revenue that you get at the end. So at the end, okay, now the display buy, we're back to that one kind of winning out in terms of the amount of return that it made. But, as you might guess, I'm not done. Returns, return data. You can generate return data on a website if you return stuff on the website, but what about returns that happen offline? What about things that get returned, suddenly by mail or over the phone? That can impact the digital channel quite a bit, and a lot of people aren't paying attention to that. So again, maybe those were really cheap sandals, so there was a huge amount of returns there and a huge cost of money that you had to refund, and suddenly, okay, this remarketing campaign actually had the greatest ROI overall, but this email blast also was really cheap, so maybe we want to advertise whatever we were advertising here through email. You can start to make new kinds of decisions. The story is a lot messier the more context you bring in, but that's okay because it's nonfiction, and that's way more important. So you need to be able to put in the appropriate context to actually produce a useful result. All right, so I just have some points on how to do that. Politically, this is a difficult thing to do. As Jim said, you can run into departments like marketing and IT that hate each other. Sometimes they hate each other a lot. So getting everybody, people can be defensive about their data. They can say, okay, how do I know you're not going to use this to prove that I'm doing a horrible job and then I get fired? A lot of people get worried about things like that. So dealing with that is kind of where soft skills come into play. Building or leveraging API integrations, again, kind of automating this process is something which you should do where possible, so analysts can spend their time actually doing analysis. You got to put it all somewhere. I'm not going to get into the technical details, but you can ask me questions about it if you'd like. But Google Cloud Platform is a good candidate for people using Google Analytics. We work with this a lot in terms of data. There's a built-in data export into BigQuery. You can start to pull together data there, and then you mash it up. So take those different data sets, pull them together with SQL, or use R, Python, or your language of choice to start to assemble that data. And an example of that is this giant SQL statement that comes from Google Analytics' BigQuery Cookbook, which is a resource they have on their site. And what this basically does is takes the exported data from Google Analytics for revenue, merges it together with some refund data and some product cost data to produce a more meaningful return on investment number. The other piece I wanted to talk about is machine learning. So machine learning coming down the pipe. A lot of people are taking advantage of it. A lot of people, most people are not. But it offers a lot of opportunities to automatically predict things and to produce analysis that's very useful. One of the examples of this is, kinds of affinities that you can see, correlations between certain kinds of actions people take and the things they buy, or between certain kinds of products and products that they're likely to buy next. So here's an example of a summary output from an exercise like this, where you see doing certain things on the website, applying for financing or sharing something or clicking the phone number, are likely to produce certain kinds of results. You can do this faster with machine learning, not necessarily only with machine learning, but bringing these down into meaningful summaries that people can digest is one of the kind of functions here that's useful. And predictions can be used, especially when you bring in machine learning, automatically to personalize the website dynamically as people use it. So what recommended products are we going to display? What recommended article should you read next? Getting that those algorithms that actually produce those results, hooking them up to some output from machine learning is very valuable, because you can get better results in terms of more sales, pushing people down the pipe. When remarketing a product is likely to produce a sale, or when a sale would happen without it, I dwell on this, but whether or not you should remarket, there's huge money to be saved in terms of marketing and the way people are spending marketing dollars right now, in terms of we shouldn't send the catalog to these people, as Jim said, or we shouldn't remarket to these people who already bought the product. Getting some more intelligence in there and improving those automated systems are big. And testing plans. So on-site testing, does this landing page work better than this landing page? What kind of content is more likely to produce a good result? That kind of stuff can, again, be informed by machine learning, can be informed by data science generally, and give you some idea of what things to test next to produce best results.
Can I throw something in here, Colin?
Sure can.
So this is it's implicit, but just to make it explicit, when we kind of talk about that progression of the space, our job was always to capture as much data as possible to do reporting. And what Colin just talked about is, at some point again in the last couple of years, people realized, what if instead of using this for reporting, we used it for targeting? Like, we're bypassing the analysts and the reporting, and we're taking all this data we're capturing to create smart systems, which is like a neat byproduct of all the work we've done to create the data in the first place, right? Sorry, Colin.
Yeah. So basically, organizationally, there's three kinds of areas that I think are very valuable for data science teams to bring some things to digital organizations. One of them is sanity, by improving the methodology, by being more careful in terms of the way that data is actually processed and the kinds of results and reporting that you produce. With those kinds of skills, you can do a much better job of this than a lot of marketing teams are doing right now. Going with that is maturity. So by applying those sophisticated methods, you can improve the kinds of questions that are asked, and you can tackle tougher questions. So a lot of things that marketing teams just can't answer right now or aren't thinking about, but maybe the CMO is annoyed at them because they're not thinking about it. The next kind of step in maturity for organizations. And insight, by answering those questions, everything I talked about related to machine learning, leveraging those technologies to produce actual results and actually improve things, that's really, another category in itself. And that's it. So thank you.